Well, welcome. I hope you are having a fantastic time today. And I know we all lead busy lives, and I don't take it for granted when you choose to spend time here with us. And I make sure to go find some really interesting conversationalists to bring up some topics in ways that maybe you haven't thought of before. And today is going to be no exception. I'm looking forward to our conversation today with Andy Regal, and we're going to be talking about negotiating bully culture, power, fear, and the hidden cost of toxic leadership. So, welcome, Andy.
Cindy, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation. It is so in line with sort of my mission, if you will. And for our listeners, Andy today, I wanted to have him on the show because I think he brings a powerful and, painfully honest lens to one of the most pervasive and yet least discussed negotiation arenas in our lives. And that's navigating, bully culture in the workplace and beyond. And Andy's a longtime media executive. He's got more than 30 years at Court TV, CNBC, MSNBC, the Wall Street Journal, you name it. He's been there and done it. And he's also the author of Surviving Bully Culture. It's a raw, compelling look at how bullying and fear-based leadership and, let's call it what it is. Psychological aggression can shape careers, can crush people's confidence, and impact entire organizations' cultures. And today we're seeing that more than ever, I think, where a lot of workplace cultures seem to be built on it. And, one of the reasons I started Art of Feminine Negotiation is to try and dismantle that way of thinking and reframe maybe how we show up. So, Andy, let's start. Your work highlights a distinction that I think a lot of people, struggle to articulate, that difference between a leader who occasionally snaps and someone who's actually a bully. So what is that line? Why does it matter?
Sure, and thank you. It's a wonderful introduction, Cindy, and it is a painful topic. I lived through it for 25 years. I actually loved working at the places you described, but workplace hostility can really hurt us in so many different ways. I will mention I have a little bruise on my forehead, which was painful. I hurt myself running. So for those that are watching on video, I'm fine. My sweater matches my bruise, but I'm fine. But speaking of painful circumstances, I think it is a good framing to discuss the difference between just somebody who might be a tough boss, a fair boss, and somebody who's a bully. And the way I'd kind of describe it or define it and delineate it is to say a bully boss is someone who targets an individual for harm. It's targeted, it's repeated, and it's harmful both to the employee
Yeah.
and to the business. So this is not about somebody being kind of tough with you to get better, putting their arm around you and telling you, hey, you got to get better. We got to do this better because it's really important. If you know that your boss cares about you
Yeah.
and cares about your future with the organization, that's not bullying. This is about targeted behavior on the part of the boss that hurts the employee and the business. And I will say that most people that are bullied are good people, devoted, productive, and loyal employees.
Yeah.
And those are the people we're concerned about talking about
Yeah.
today.
And I think it's important to draw a distinction because we became, we're in such a cultural shift right now. And I think, I look at my kids as compare, my generation, it was like suck it up. And now it's all about, get out there. And let's face it, we've all had moments, in leadership roles in our life where we've been like mortified at how we showed up on a particular day or in a particular moment and recognizing that's different. And just full transparency, since our guest here, Andy, has been so transparent for those, if you're watching as well, to notice, although unlike Andy, I did not color coordinate, but I just had surgery. I got a big bloody spot on my head here, quite literally, frankly. So, I mean,
We're gonna effort through today, Cindy, together.
absolutely. And why don't you talked about the fact that you had lived through it for, decades. I wonder if
Yeah.
you're comfortable sharing with us maybe the moment that crystallized for you that I don't want to take this anymore. I need to change this bully culture.
It never happened, which is why it never happened, which is why I wrote my book. I thought, Cindy, that I came to New York City to do television.
Yeah.
And I thought once I got into this is what it's like. It's high pressure, high intensity,
Yes.
and this is how it is. And you asked for it.
Yeah.
And so now you got it.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize truly, I knew I didn't like it. I knew it hurt me and harmed me and damaged me. But I thought it was just part of the business. And what I've learned in the 7 years of researching this issue and talking to people worldwide, and especially up in Canada, far ahead of the United States on this issue, that it happens in every industry.
Yeah.
You name it. the legal
Yeah,
profession,
tell me about
construction.
it. What you just said so resonated, right? I remember being this young, fresh-faced 20-something-year-old and being treated like shit and going,
Yes.
okay, I guess this is just the nature of the practice.
Well,
I better toughen up.
and that's why we're having this dialogue and why this dialogue is so important because nobody in the history of work has ever asked to be mistreated.
Yeah,
Nobody wants it, nobody needs it. And as I said, it's bad for the employee and bad for the business. So what happened was I just thought there's something wrong with me. There's a lot of
yeah,
self-blame
yeah,
amongst people that are targeted for bullying. Why me? What did I do
yeah,
wrong? And somebody who's apathetic, doesn't care about their job, shows up late, those are not the people we're concerned with.
yeah,
They don't deserve to be bullied either.
yeah,
But the people that are affected most by bullying are those of us that care
yeah,
deeply
yeah,
about doing a good job, contributing,
yeah,
being a good team player, all of which I was, and I've counseled and communicated with hundreds of bully targets,
yeah,
all of whom just want to know why me. And
yeah,
so to answer your question even more directly, if I may, I didn't realize it until I started researching the topic. It happens everywhere. And I didn't identify it or define it as bullying
yeah,
until I realized that this is a form of mismanagement and
yeah.
it's got to stop.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was thinking as you were saying that, I mean, across the board, yeah, I was going to say women in particular, but that's probably not true. People pleasers in particular, and women tend to be conditioned to be. I mean, it's so devastating for them because our entire raison d'etre is to try and please people, and then you've got somebody bullying you. And as you say, you feel like, what am I doing? I'm falling short. Now, why do you think when you're saying it's across all industries, like why is this pattern repeated across so many organizations and industries?
Well, there's a lack of training and a lack of awareness as to what really good management is. And I'll give you my best quick tip right off the bat.
Yeah.
I got some executive training when I was at the Wall Street Journal, and the woman there was fantastic. And we'd have hour-long seminars once a week. And the main thing she said to me was, and I'm sharing this with everybody in your audience, and it's great for managers, supervisors, and bosses.
Okay.
If you'll just listen, don't judge.
Yeah.
If you listen and don't judge right away, you'll be a better manager than most. And the reason is so many of my bully bosses never asked me a question.
Yeah.
And sometimes something didn't even go wrong, but things are going to get wrong, go wrong in the
Yeah.
workplace. We
Yeah.
all know that. If everything went great and we made $1 million a month, nobody would get angry. If the money's just flowing in, there's no reason to get angry. But what happens is there's pressure, there's tension, and really the mismanagement, the abhorrent behavior, the anger, the hostility comes from the boss themselves. It's often not about the employee.
Yeah.
And so what we have to work on is not allowing the bully boss to affect our well-being in one way, but also bully bosses recognizing and understanding the harm they're doing to their employees and to their business. And
Yeah.
that's where we really need to do the hard work.
And I want to really hit for our listeners there on that tip that you just got from Andy and let it take a moment to breathe it in because, this idea about listening instead of we are not good at that in North America. We are
No.
probably one of the worst globally across the sea. We believe that the successful person is the one who's talking the loudest and the longest, and we've defined success based on those models. So it's not surprising we get that bully culture where people come in sort of beating their chest, believing that's a way to show that they're successful, and we do not listen well. And I think that about asking questions. Curiosity, the art of curiosity is an absolute gift that will elevate you above your peers if you can tap into getting curious and start listening more than you're talking and asking questions more than you're directing. So,
Yeah. I
I,
say in my book, Cindy, like I almost hang my head as I wrote this
yeah,
about if only my bosses had asked me questions. I'll give you a quick anecdote if I may. Years ago, there was a big problem where I was working. I was working and there was a problem that one of the managers needed me to go down and try to fix it. And I went down to Lower Manhattan. We had a camera person who wasn't dressed appropriately for the courtroom. And so I ran down, got to the person. He went home. He got the right clothes. He was supposed to be wearing like all black and he had a white shirt on. It was not a big deal, but our boss was furious about it.
yeah,
Furious. He used to get furious. So I got it. I stayed there. I was going to run the camera if I needed to, but the judge was a little bit late. The camera person came back, and it was a very important case, and everything worked fine. So I went back up to my office feeling pretty good about myself. I solved the problem. I had swooped in. It wasn't even something I was involved with. Somebody else couldn't get there. So I swooped in and I thought, oh boy, I'm going to get some accolades for this. I saved the problem. The boss called me. In fact, it was the most horrible thing because his assistant would say, "Hey, Andy, the boss would like a word." And that
Oh,
was and your heart would
it's a
just
death.
drop,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden I'm now a dead man walking because
Yeah.
anytime the boss wanted a word,
Yeah. It's
you
not
walk down,
good.
not good, horrible. And then this is where the damage comes, the hypervigilance, the
Yeah.
anxiety, the heart palpitations, all of it. And I walked in his office and he was unreasonable.
Yeah.
This boss, and by that I mean he couldn't be reasoned with. He wasn't going to ask a question. It was dangerous to try to explain yourself. And I got demoted.
Yeah. For
I got demoted. He said, "How did this happen?"
oh,
He
for
goes, "Whatever position you are now, you're the lower position. I had just been promoted." I
yeah.
got demoted and I had solved the problem.
Yeah.
And he said, "Now get out."
Yeah.
And I was scared of him. There was fear. And luckily, my supervisors worked it out. But that's what can happen when, and you said it exactly, when bosses are not inquisitive,
Yeah.
when they're not curious, and they're just going to dictate and
Yeah.
mandate because they can abuse their power.
But how short-sighted. And again, for our listeners, what a great example. And thanks for sharing that anecdote because so he demotes you, which
Mhm.
also stops people from being problem solvers. You're like, oh crap. I got not only did I not get credit, but I got demoted from trying to be creative in the workplace and people shut down. And I also want to just really hit on it for our listeners. When you were describing it, really resonated with me, Andy, about that hyper vigilism because it's a form of being in an abusive relationship, right? And so we only ever think about domestic relationships where that comes up, but it can come up in the workplace. And speaking of that, you had interviewed, I think, a number of experts who describe bullying as trauma by intentional human design. I don't know if I've got that right. And saying that targets are usually, highly competent and collaborative and ethical. So, what is it about that particular personality type that attracts bullies, or is that even true?
Well, yes, and I'm so glad you asked that because I think I and so many of us are the quintessential bully targets. First of all, I believe that bully bosses and supervisors can smell fear.
Yeah.
And I was fearful because, again, my core value, and so many of us, kind of do unto others. And I grew up in a really great family where if you did the right things, got good grades,
Yeah.
played
Yeah.
sports, played a musical instrument,
Yeah.
behaved well, I didn't do drugs, all this
Yeah.
stuff. And I'm not saying the kid, nobody should be bullied,
Yeah.
but I did everything right. So I thought when I get into the workplace, all I have to do is act appropriately and accordingly and produce, and the boss will love me. And then all of a sudden, in fact, I think some of the bosses disliked me because I was trying so hard to be likable. And I say, was there something about me? Was I cloying?
Yeah.
Was I too ambitious? All this self-blame. And so those of us that believe in fairness
Yes.
and believe in doing the right thing and are good team players, we're the ones that get targeted because often the bully boss is not a kind person, doesn't know how to be empathetic.
Yeah.
And so it bothers them to see someone else that is. And so what I would say to you, and you mentioned domestic violence, my wife is an attorney who represents domestic violence victims,
Wow.
and we've talked about along the spectrum. And again, I'm not talking about nobody ever threw a stapler at me or hit me.
Yeah.
This is not about that. That's assault, and there are laws against that. There are no laws against workplace bullying for the most part. Canada's a little further
A
ahead. In the
little less
United
further
States,
ahead.
there are none, a
Yeah.
little better. But for the most part, it's very hard to prove a case like that.
Yes.
And yet the harm is quite similar in terms of your self-worth, your
Yeah.
self-esteem. I had hypervigilance, high anxiety,
Yeah.
recurring dreams, digestive problems,
Yeah.
and harmful thoughts. All these things happen. And they happen to those of us because the bullies can see us coming and they know, and this is the point
Yeah.
I want to make, Cindy, they know you're going to go right back to work and try
Yeah.
harder.
And try harder.
And that's not a solution
Yeah.
to solving this
Yeah.
problem. I learned it the hard way. I was trying so hard already. I went back to work and that never stopped
Yeah.
the harm.
You said something that I want to circle back to though, because going back to what we were talking about before about the why me, why me. For those of you who may be feeling that, I think, Andy just gave us an answer that really gives a bit of solace or at least context. it's like you're holding a mirror up to them and they don't like what they see because
Mhm.
they see you being conscientious and empathetic and showing up and trying to be the best version of yourself, and they know that they're not. So every time you show up, it's like there's a mirror to them that they're, and they don't like what they see, and then they lash out, which doesn't excuse it. And it can be very disorienting. So if you're experiencing bullying in the workplace and you feel like you've lost your ground and you're constantly getting the rug pulled out from under you, that's not on you. That is not on you. And also, I wanted to talk about, because I don't know what your experience is of this, Annie, but it's often the case, I think, that bullies can be very charismatic and very talented and often well liked, until they're in that bully mode. So, how does that duality make it harder for targets to name their abuse, do you think?
Yeah, you anticipated my next point that I wanted to make about the brilliant jerk.
Yeah.
And that's a term of art. The
Yeah, I
brilliant
like
jerk. Look, bullies aren't bullies all the time. Okay? Bully bosses aren't bullies all the time. But what I say is they've gotten to a point to be CEO. There aren't too many bullies in the mailroom, right? The bullies tend to be in high positions, either the top person or the person close with
yeah,
proximity to power.
yeah,
Okay? And they're often very good at what they do. They might be great salespeople. They might be great innovators. You think of Tim Cook, who was a terrible bully boss at
yeah,
Apple. You think of Elon Musk. Oh, if you read his autobiography or his biography by Walter
yeah,
Isaacson, a horrible bully.
yeah,
Now we can argue about the good these people did for society and so forth, but as bosses,
yeah,
they can be very good at something, but ultimately they may be a high performer, but if they're damaging the productivity
yeah,
of 20, 30, 40, 50, or it could be the entire enterprise,
yeah,
it's not worth it. And what happens is these people, whether they run smaller teams or are CEOs of big corporations, you lose people.
yeah,
You end up with people on FMLA.
yeah,
You end up with people who I've counseled who are crying on the way to work. You
yeah,
end up with people who are at each other's cubicles or offices complaining about the boss
yeah,
as opposed to working. Then you have to spend more money hiring new people. So,
yeah,
what I'm saying to bosses and organizations that I work with who bring me on to deal with toxic culture is, and I hope this isn't true, but let's even assume the boss or the manager doesn't care about the people.
yeah,
Maybe they like abusing their power and it makes them feel good, whatever the reason is. And I don't spend a lot of time diagnosing bully bosses. If you don't care about your employees, you should be caring about your business.
yeah,
And the costs are astronomical, literally
yeah,
billions and billions of dollars. And we know this because people leave
yeah.
or they're let go and the institutional memory is gone. It costs more to hire people. You have to get a hiring firm.
Yeah. Even leaving aside, and sorry to cut you off, but the letting
Yeah,
go,
yeah, yeah.
they're
Yeah.
less productive in the workplace. They're less creative because they're afraid of getting their, chopped off at the knees every time. So they offer less, and you end up stifling creativity and the very juice that you need to make your business succeed.
Well, and you alluded to this earlier, and I was in the communications business, still am.
Yeah,
And yet, the worst possible thing that happens when this occurs, and I saw it everywhere I went, is what we call a chilling effect. And you just talked about it.
yeah,
People stop giving ideas for fear of
yeah,
being shouted down. And,
yeah,
and a lot of times, the stuff we're talking about is not yelling and screaming. It's the rolling of the eyes, the interrupting, the ill-tempered nature of people where you stop collaborating, you stop cooperating, you stop sharing ideas.
yeah,
And that too is a massive cost. And managers and bosses, especially the bullies, don't recognize it, don't want to hear it, and they think they've got all the answers
yeah.
and they're making a huge mistake. So yes, it's a massive cost to your business.
Yeah. And it's fun when you talked about the eye rolling. I mean, the behaviors that are included are, and I know you outline this in your book as well. It includes stuff like, excluding people from meetings or withholding resources or, humiliation, social isolation. Were there any of them that you find are more insidious from a psychological standpoint?
Well, I'll talk about the very worst for a second. We can get more into it. For me, in my experience and talking to hundreds of bully victims, the isolation, the ostracizing is the absolute worst.
Yeah.
It is inherent in all of us that we want to be part of a group. That's why we love to go to work. Now, we might not like work every day,
Yeah.
but we like being part of the organization, the
Yeah.
team. And most of us that get bullied, I love being in television. I love the work. I love the storytelling. I loved it all. I loved being in the center of things.
Yeah.
But it becomes so just absolutely damaging in every way when you're left off of an email. I was left off, I was vice president of original programming, and I found out through somebody that they were having a programming offsite, and I wasn't invited.
Yeah.
And so they were going away for the weekend, and it was a new CEO, so he had a whole bunch of his new people.
Yeah.
But here's the thing that I really wanted to say, Cindy, and I wrote it down because I wanted to make this point. If somebody had been saying to me, and this is the problem, silence. Silence is the most damaging and hurtful form of bullying. Nobody ever said to me, hey, you're not getting it done. You're not doing a good job. Never,
Yeah.
never once when I wasn't invited to this offsite.
Yeah.
And so that's what many bully bosses do. They don't want to confront you. They don't want to deal with you. They don't want to deal with the problem. So what do? The easiest thing for them is to ostracize you, to put you off
Yeah.
to the side, and you have no idea why. It's one thing if a boss sits down with you and say, "Hey, Andy, I need you to do better at this,"
Yeah.
you know, and that never happened to me. I was getting promoted at every level, and I know that the people in your audience are nodding their heads, and I know you
Yeah.
are too,
Yeah.
saying, I was doing good
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
And yet, so when you're taken off the team in a way and not included,
Yeah.
and you're not asked for your opinion, and before you were a valued part of the team,
Yeah.
and people cared about your knowledge and your experience and your collegiality, that is and you use the word, and I love the word, that's the most insidious
Yeah.
silence or something like silence.
And it starts early. I mean, as you're saying that, I'm thinking about back in, grade school and high school and that kind of ostracization and people, that silence and being held out. And so let's talk a bit about how past experiences prime us maybe to normalize bullying later in our career, right? And I thought one of the most powerful threads in your story was the way early experiences shaped that tolerance for mistreatment. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, in my family, and I touched on this earlier, but there's a lot to be said about this. There was no mean talking in
Yeah.
my family.
Yeah.
Actually, my grandfather, and I was about 7 or 8, and I tell this story in the book. We went out fishing. I hated fishing, and he wanted me to hook the shrimp through the heart of the shrimp, and it was alive, and I had to reach in the bucket,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I'm squeamish. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. And he said, "Give me that egghead."
Oh,
Egghead. Now, there's much worse things. And again, call me sensitive. I don't
yeah.
care. That's fine. But I have to tell you in a very serious way, Cindy, it's the only conversation I remember that I
Oh,
ever had with my
yeah.
grandfather. And I think he was a fine grandfather.
Yeah.
Nothing. But what I'm saying is
Yeah.
when bosses say things to us
Yeah.
that are hurtful, and one of my bully bosses, I used to call him kind of a sharpshooter, a sniper,
Yeah.
because he'd come after you, and then I think he went after somebody else after that,
Yeah.
and he probably didn't even think about it. And so these early, and girls, because I know you deal with a lot of girls and women in your work. Girls often, not as much as boys, they ostracize their friend. You're
Yeah.
great friends with a friend group, as we call it now.
Yeah.
My daughter went through it, and all of a sudden the group doesn't like you anymore.
Yeah.
And now you're alone and you can't imagine what you did wrong. It's the worst feeling in the world. I hear it from
Devastating.
teenage girls all the time.
Yeah.
I'll give you another example earlier in life. I experienced fraternity hazing,
Yeah.
which is another
It,
horrible.
yeah.
And here in the States, I don't know if it's as common up in Canada, but in these fraternities, it's an accepted form of
Yeah.
abuse of power, where these vulnerable freshmen are abused by the brothers, and it's oh, boys will be boys. No, absolutely not. And also, bully bosses will be bully bosses. No, we can't continue to say that this is just a part of being at work.
Yeah.
That's why, because
Man.
again,
Yeah.
me too, finally. Hey, look, women, you know this better than I.
Yeah.
That was a part of being at work,
Oh, generation after
Gen-
generation sucked it up.
that, hey,
Okay. And
suck it up.
women to each other. I mean, you see a lot of the movies are coming out now. I mean, the
Yeah,
women who tried to speak up
yeah,
got further ostracized, not just by the perpetrators, but by other women who were
yeah.
not willing to.
So,
And
right.
I just want to take one sec because we've talked about power a couple of times now. And again, for our
Yeah.
listeners, I mean, it's one of the things that started me down this path is when did we get convinced that power means exerting power over other people as opposed to experiencing power with people. There's so much greater strength in that. Like, how did we get it so wrong over the years? So,
Well, and I've also seen the other, right? I have two anecdotes, but I'll tell you the quickest one. You may recall Johnny Cochran was O.J. Simpson's
yep.
attorney. Now, whether you liked how Johnny Cochran comported himself in the courtroom or whether whether you thought OJ guilty, not guilty, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
After the trial, the criminal trial, I became Johnny Cochran's executive producer.
Oh, cool.
He and I worked with Johnny for a couple of years on a television show that he hosted.
Yeah.
The reason I mention it is because Johnny Cochran had power.
Yeah.
He was famous. He was maybe at the time was the most famous attorney
Yeah.
in America at that point.
Yeah.
And he had lots of money. He was already a wealthy attorney
Yeah.
at that time. And you know what he did? He could get his way with anything, with anybody,
Yeah.
because he had power and authority.
Yeah.
And you know what he did? He was nice to everybody.
Yeah.
He was kind. He
Yeah.
was respectful.
Yeah.
And he still got his way,
Yeah.
no matter what he wanted. But he took that authority. And I
Yeah.
like to tell the story because a lot of people thought he was a terrible guy. He was a wonderful guy.
Yeah.
And you can use, and you don't have to be nice all the time. As I
Yeah.
said, if as long as your employees, we'll bring it back to the workplace,
Yeah.
as long as your employees know you have their welfare, you
Yeah.
can be tough.
Yeah.
We're not asking everybody to be in a good mood, be nice, be
Yeah.
loving. No, that's not, it's the workplace. That's why we call it work. But employees must know that you have their back. And
Yeah.
Johnny knew that everybody he came in contact with, he showed kindness. He
Yeah.
was interested. He showed that they mattered. And
Yeah.
that's such a crucial thing. It's a new word, mattering.
Yes.
And when bullies bully in the workplace, you feel like you don't matter and
Yeah.
you lose your psychological
Yeah.
safety. And that's when it all starts to fall apart, when
Yeah.
you don't feel safe at work.
Yeah. And it's interesting when you say about Johnny, because I believe that that's why he had the power, right? And it's interesting. We say, did that and he was still powerful. I actually think people who really have true power, it's because they put the welfare of others first and they're kind and they show up when they, otherwise wouldn't have had to. And let's talk quickly about accountability as well, right? I mean, I know you write that bullies don't apologize, whereas leaders with integrity do. So talk a bit about what accountability looks like.
Again, Canada's ahead, but there's not enough accountability.
Yeah.
And this happens because you can get away with it. Bullies can't get away with it unless they know they have leverage because they run the place. And you mentioned HR before. We don't give HR the autonomy
Yeah.
and the authority to address these claims of
Yeah.
workplace bullying. Okay. And sometimes it is hard to define, but that's why we need and why bully targets feel so alone. And you know this in your work, Cindy.
Yeah.
We feel so alone. I felt so alone. Who are you going to talk to?
Yeah.
You can't, your colleagues can't help you. It's the boss. You can't go to HR. And so, what I argue for is to give HR some autonomy to do this. But of course, the boss, who's usually the bully or the number two or
Yeah.
number three person, right?
Yes.
And what I'm arguing for, and here in the States, there's a number of bills that they're trying to pass. They've done similar things in Canada to try to make this stuff
Yeah.
where there's laws to protect workplace bullies, like we have in the States with
Yeah.
civil rights codes. So
Yeah.
if somebody says, "Hey, old man, we don't need you around here," you can make a claim.
Yeah.
But bosses and bullies are much more subtle than that. And so here's what I'm arguing for. And anybody listening to this, any boss, supervisor, CEO, tomorrow you can do this in your workplace. Just create bylaws and standards of conduct, just like with sexual harassment,
Yeah.
where people have to sign a document. Maybe they watch a video, but they sign a document that they understand what that behavior is, how it's defined, and that there will be repercussions if they don't follow those very strict guidelines. And the same thing should be for workplace behavior for everybody from the CEO down. And it must have repercussions for those that don't follow it. So that if you don't follow and you're a bully and you treat people poorly and it's targeted and harmful and no
Yeah.
benefit, then you don't get promoted. You don't get your bonus. It should be part of your evaluation and everybody should sign on to it. And businesses can do that tomorrow.
Well, and I love your idea about autonomy for HR because I got to tell you, I don't know if you knew, but I practiced labor and social justice for 30 years, law. And I saw over and over again, I'm like, what is the point of having a human resources department if they're
Yeah.
just towing the line for the bullies at the top? And in hearings, invariably the HR person would be thrown as a sacrificial lamb on the stand to get cross-examined the hell out of them. And they're towing the line, even when it's clear the position is untenable, indefensible, and they're
Yeah.
still there towing the line, right? So
No, because if you're the head of HR, you don't want to go up against the CEO.
yeah,
Your job is at stake.
yeah,
And so we need to give them that ability in the appropriate way to address these problems and not fear for their own jobs. I know a colleague of mine in this work who was head of HR. She was horribly bullied
yeah.
and had to leave as head of HR. HR people get bullied too.
Oh,
They're
yeah,
and again, we want to hold on to our paychecks. We want to hold on to our self-esteem, our self-worth,
yeah.
and we don't want to bring all this stuff home and have it ruin our personal lives as well.
But it does. And let's talk about that for a moment.
Yeah.
For those of that out there who are, because it has become such a culture, I think we sometimes minimize it. So, in terms of your research, what did you learn about the long-term impacts of bullying on, identity and confidence and self-esteem, emotional regulation, even our physical health? Just,
Yeah, it's awful and it happened to me. And believe me, I'm not proud of the fact that I couldn't figure out a way to handle the bullies. There's a lot of shame for men especially, women too,
yeah,
but there's a lot of shame just like there is on the playground when you get your
yeah,
butt kicked by the
yeah,
bigger boy in school, there's such shame.
yeah,
And for those of us who feel pretty good about ourselves, there's so much more shame
yeah,
that how could this happen to me? And so, as I said, I listed the things that can happen, all from, these digestive problems, heart palpitations, the self-worth. So it's emotional,
yeah,
physical, psychological. And again, people end up in the hospital and people do become, I've talked to them who become suicidal.
yeah,
It gets that bad.
yeah,
And so here's the point I want to make. I don't spend a lot of time trying to diagnose bullies. They act this way because they have their own issues. It's
yeah,
more about them. And I think you said this earlier. It's more about them than it is about you, if you're a good employee. And
yeah,
I believe most people are. But so we can't do much about that. We can't make the bully our best friend, and we can't make the bully contrite. So what we can do and we must do is protect ourselves and teach ourselves how to cope and heal. And how do we do that? We have to find people that support us. We have to remember the people that like us and love us because the bullies feel like we're the worst person. We
yeah,
lose our self-esteem. We have to remind ourselves of who we are by finding our loved ones, our faith, family members who know who we are, friends who understand who we are. If there's a colleague that you trust, that's great too.
yeah,
But we have to work on not letting the bully overtake our entire being. We have to also not look at work in a black and white fashion. I just looked at it as, oh, the bully boss doesn't appreciate me, doesn't love me,
yeah,
doesn't want me, or any moment he's going to fire me, whatever those things are.
yeah,
And I took it home with me.
yeah,
What you have to do is appreciate that there still are good things
yeah.
during these things because it doesn't mean you're going to get fired.
And you don't want it rippling over into your personal relationships, as you say, because you bring it home. It affects how you show up with your intimate partner, with your kids, with your friends, with service providers. I mean, your entire identity gets shifted.
Oh
And
my God. I worked on a talk show and it was brittle. I came home brittle. It was toxic. And I had a newborn and a 2-year-old. I
wow,
was not a good father and I was not a good partner.
yeah,
What I work with bully victims on is to get the bully boss off your shoulder and out of your head renting space.
yeah,
So when you leave the workplace, it's not literally overwhelming.
yeah,
That, yes, work is hard, but there are things to celebrate at work, celebrate your small joys. And then when you leave work, remember who you are by surrounding yourself with the people that really know who you are and allow your light to shine. What I like to say is that bully bosses try to dim your light.
yeah.
And what we work on is not allowing them to do that. In fact, I devote and dedicate my book to those that share their light on others because bully bosses do the opposite.
Yeah. And let me ask, I mean, as you're saying that, I'm just thinking about and this is great advice for our listeners who are suffering bullying in the
Yeah.
workplace or experiencing it. What would you say to leaders who may be listening and hadn't seen themselves as bullies, but are listening to this conversation and recognizing a lot of the behaviors you're describing? What would you say to them?
I spoke to a group of about 30 small business CEOs not too long ago. And when I was done talking, I don't think any of them acknowledged, and I'm not saying they were
Yeah.
terrible bully bosses, but they all sat there for a second and said, "Oh boy, I need to rethink my communication." And one of them said, "You know, we make fun of each other a lot in the workplace.
Yeah.
Sarcasm.
Yeah.
Sarcasm is a form of bullying."
Yeah.
Another quick anecdote. I was vice president of production at a sports media company. And I'll try to tell this real quick. We had a big meeting and breakfast was supposed to be served at the meeting. I had nothing to do with that. We had an office manager. The breakfast didn't come. We had very big clients coming and they lost the order, whatever happened. And so I volunteered to the office manager. I'll tell you what, I'll go with you. Let's run down the street to the delicatessen.
Yeah.
We'll reorder it and we'll run back as quick as we can and try to get there before the clients get there. At least
Yeah.
if the clients get there for this big meeting, we'll set it up.
Yeah.
So we run down, we run back with our bags, and we beat the clients. They were in traffic, Midtown Manhattan. But there was a bully boss, the number two guy in the company.
Yeah.
And as I have my back turned to our senior team around the table with the CEO there, and I won't say the word, it may be inappropriate for your audience, but he said, "Jesus, Regal, you can't even effing produce breakfast."
Yeah.
Now, he didn't say effing, but I hope that's
Yeah.
okay for your
Yeah. No,
audience.
yeah, we
But
got
okay, but the
it.
point, so so it was sarcasm, and of course I was the one who jumped up to volunteer to
Yeah.
help. And what it said to the entire group is that I'm okay for ridicule.
Yeah.
Andy Regal, he's
Yep.
okay to be ridiculed. Everybody laughed. Why? Because they were happy it wasn't them, and he
Yes.
was the number two guy in the company, and they didn't want to see, they want to make sure he knew that they thought he was funny.
Yeah.
That hurt. And I'm not the kind of person that has the best retort right after that.
Yeah.
I didn't
You
have,
thought of
right?
it that night, I bet.
Right. But it hurts. It
Of course.
hurts. So you really have to be careful. Again, that's not the worst form of bullying at all. But when you're in a position of authority around other members, that is bullying, and it's a bad form of bullying. It's
And
not the
it's
worst.
insidious again,
Yes.
because, and I love that you talked about that ripple effect. And for our listeners
Yeah.
here, if you're
Yeah.
the bystander who's supporting the bullying by laughing, just glad
Yep.
it's not you, then you're part of the problem as well.
And
So,
it's hard to, if I may, just real quick, it's impossible for bystanders don't want to risk their jobs
yeah,
by saying something. So that's why you feel so alone in this circumstance
yeah,
because no one's going to come to rescue you.
yeah. And yet, I mean, it's kind of like, again, having represented a lot of unions, and I just throw this out there for our listeners. The more people who are willing to speak up, then the more that becomes the norm and can diffuse the behavior, right? As we start to make those shifts, or at the very least, don't laugh, don't encourage it, don't be a participant in that kind of behavior. So we're talking about this bullying, Andy, and I mean, legal workplaces are notorious for that hierarchy, that pressure, those, sharp-edged personalities, and I'm embarrassed to say we wear it like a badge of honor. So from your lens, why do bully cultures thrive in professions like law or corporate litigation or those big firm practices?
Yeah, unfortunately, this is something that is ubiquitous in the law. And the reason is, first of all, much of law, litigation, and corporate law too, you're at odds,
Yeah,
right? And so that brings out the tensions in people. But also, you have really clear hierarchies. I'll tell you that I worked for 10 years at Court TV, a cable network that covered real trials in the States and around the world, actually. And I was amazed at how much authority a judge had.
yeah,
I saw so many bully judges.
yes,
And why? Because they rule their courtroom.
yeah,
And managing partners rule their law firms. Look, when you run a law firm or you're a senior attorney, whatever it is where you're above other people, and you have a lot of law students, people that have just passed the bar coming in, and you alluded to this earlier too, is, well, this is how it was done to me.
yeah,
Well, this is what we have to stop.
yeah,
The people are there to do a good job. They've been trained. I'll give you an example. I had a coaching client because I coach bully victims, Stanford Law School, valedictorian in her high school, went to Stanford Law School, graduated from Stanford Law School, and was so horribly bullied at the law firm that she joined
yeah,
that she became suicidal.
yeah,
And you can't imagine. And when you meet this person, you're like, what a powerhouse she
yeah,
is. You can't
yeah,
imagine this happening to her. And you can't imagine, and I've seen it over and over again in the legal profession, that these are brilliant people who made it all the way through law school, got jobs only to be mistreated.
Yeah.
And so it is something that's part of the fabric of the law. It's the fabric of many professions, not just the law, but it is rampant in the
Yeah.
legal profession. And it's a shame, and it doesn't have to be that way.
Well, it's one of the reasons I started on this path. I mean, if you look at our legal systems, our political systems in business, I mean, everything is about winning or losing. It's all in how we frame it, right? Even our language, it's opposing counsel, the other side. And there's often better solutions when we show up with curiosity, like we were talking about, and maybe a little compassion and collaboration. How can we maybe find a better outcome than either of our clients were thinking about? But
Well,
yeah,
and I doubt that your, young law students who may be working with you,
yeah,
your paralegals, or even the lawyers that join your firm that aren't partners, I doubt when they're being mistreated that they're doing better, that they're performing
I
better,
know.
that they're more productive, they're
Yeah,
more loyal to the firm. It
yeah,
just, this is something we really have to think about the costs, literal and figurative, to mistreating your employees.
yeah,
And again, tensions are high. You need to get work done. You have to get documents. I get it. I
yeah,
understand it. I come from a family. I'm married to a lawyer. My dad was a lawyer.
yeah.
I'm not one. Maybe there's a reason I wasn't one, but
Yeah.
I'm not discounting the pressure, the
Yeah.
tension, the deadlines, but what the senior managers need to understand is that the people working for you are trying very hard. If they make a mistake,
Yeah.
that's okay. You don't have to be
I know.
nice about it. We're not talking about being sweet and nice and wonderful all the
Yeah.
time. We're talking about how you're going to get the most productivity out of your
Yeah.
people, the people in your firm. And it's not by mistreating them. If anything, you're going to lose them,
Yeah.
and then you're going to have to try to find somebody else. And you
Yeah.
should look at retention and think about the cost they're in.
Yeah. And it's about treating people with dignity and respect, which ironically is what we're supposed to be fighting for as lawyers, right? I think we buy into that rationalization with bullying that it's, somehow good training. And we need to start distinguishing between high standards and, harmful power dynamics. What are some early warning tells, maybe? So for our listeners here, whether they're a partner, or as you say, senior counsel or a judge, what are some warning tells that they're maybe crossing the line from tough to toxic?
Yeah, I think it's really about listening. And we've talked about that before, you and I. But when people are forever interrupting, discounting others' perspectives.
Yeah.
Now, again, in the courtroom, you do object. I spent 10 years in courtrooms covering trials, so I've seen it. And you're allowed to object, you're allowed to interrupt. That's part of the rules of the courtroom. But it often becomes a situation where, whether it's in a courtroom or in the office, where it's disrespectful.
Yeah.
Again, where the person who has the power is treating the person like they're less than.
Yeah.
We're all human.
Yeah.
You may make more money than me. You may have seniority over me.
Yeah.
You may be a partner. And yet you deserve, if you've hired the person, if you brought them into your firm, you've said to them, we value you over many others.
Yeah.
So the people deserve to be treated that way until if they prove they're not,
Yeah.
then you have to quietly and comfortably either put them on probation or let them go. And you should be kind on their way out because they probably didn't want to get fired. But we're not talking about underperformers here.
Yeah.
We're talking about people that, in many cases in law firms, are working 14, 16-hour days until midnight, especially in corporate law firms. And
Yeah.
so if the employee knows that the partner has his or her back and cares about their future with the firm, in most cases, not all, that's not really bullying.
Yeah.
But in most cases, when you're being treated that way, you feel like they don't care about you, you lose
Yeah.
your psychological safety, then
Yeah.
you're thinking about it, you're not as productive, and it starts a downward spiral,
Yeah.
which nobody wants.
And how do you think law should, like, what advice do you have for law firm leaders who are listening? Like, how should they respond when bullying's happening under their watch? And especially if the bully is a rainmaker, where they often just get so much latitude, right?
Yep. And we talk about the brilliant jerk in this work. And it's great. It's great if you're a rainmaker. And what I often talk about is, look, go after the competition. If you're in court, you can be as mean and nasty. I don't necessarily recommend it, but that's the opposition. Go for it.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is we're on the same team here,
Yeah.
in the same firm, in
Yeah.
the same business. So why are you treating me like the competition?
Yeah.
I'm here to help, to contribute, and to further my own career.
Yeah.
And so that's what the senior people have to look out for is when they're treating their own people
Yeah.
as if they're the enemy,
Yeah.
as if they're not full participants. They may not be equal participants, but full
Yeah.
participants in the success of the firm.
Yeah.
And that's really what you have to think about. And you have to think not so much about you, because that's what happens with bully bosses. They're only focused, and their reactions and their responses are all about them. They're angry, they're short-tempered, they're ill-mannered, they're in a bad mood. They have to think about, because it's a lot of times about them.
Yeah.
This is how they were treated.
Yes.
And and
It
and we
just keeps perpetuating.
so the cycle, we want to get people out of the cycle. We want to get the bully victims out of the cycle of allowing the bully victim to overtake their well-being. And
Yeah.
we want supervisors, managers, and bosses and partners to understand that oftentimes it's about them and they should close their door, take a breath,
Yeah.
rewrite that email,
Yeah.
and remember that they should have the well-being of their employees at heart. And even if they're short-tempered at times, and they should repair the relationship.
Yeah.
If they were inappropriate, they should apologize. They should repair the relationship,
Yeah.
and they shouldn't just let it go and say, well, too bad.
Yeah.
I'm the boss.
Yeah. And I'd actually extend it. It's interesting when you're saying sort of within the organization, absolutely. And with the benefit of hindsight, looking back over 30 years, I'd extend it to say, even, the other side, right? I mean, yes, you can be vigorous in your position, but treat people with dignity and respect at the end of the day, right? I mean, that really is, we're supposed to be modeling that behavior. And so you can be as vigorous in your position as you want, but that doesn't justify bullying behavior, demeaning behavior with, opposing counsel and that. So I love the messaging there. And I think you may have already answered this, Andy, but just sort of
Yeah.
wrapping up, if you were designing an anti-bullying culture code for the legal profession, what would, your top principle or principles be?
Yeah, I'd like to think that the decorum that is set up in the courtroom, and when it's followed, it's a beautiful thing to
Yeah.
see. When people follow that this is a courtroom
Yeah.
and they comport themselves in the proper way where they're not insulting, nobody's saying anything personal.
Yeah.
And it does get personal
Yeah.
oftentimes. I've seen it so many times. I covered mostly criminal cases
Yeah.
in my work as an executive producer at Court TV. But if you're setting up a law firm or thinking about the culture of your business, think about the culture, the proper culture
Yeah.
of a courtroom and how people treat each other, especially opposing counsel, in the way that it should be done. And that's how people should treat each other in their own offices. And I would say even a little bit better because again, when you're with opposing counsel, there's going to be, they call it closing argument, although there's not a lot of argument between people in closing argument, but there's a lot of arguing in court.
Yeah.
And there can be arguing in the office, but it's got to be for the betterment of the employee and the betterment of the firm.
Yeah.
And that's where we cross the line when it's not.
Yeah.
And I've talked to so many people who worked at law firms and like you, who just couldn't take it.
Yeah.
The acrimony and the incivility
Yeah.
and at times the degradation. And in the history of law firms, there isn't one law student or law grad or somebody who passed the bar who wanted to be
Yeah.
mistreated, who wanted to be looked at as less so.
Yeah.
Not one person. And
And
that's what we have to
perhaps
think.
the ultimate irony is that I think the vast majority by far of people who go into the practice of law do it because they care passionately, deeply about making the world a better place. And somehow, what happens to that? So I invite all of our listeners as well, get back to that caring. It's such a simple proposition, right? And if you show up that way in your own workplace, and as you say, how you conduct yourself in the courtroom and beyond, it'll be a different thing. I normally end by asking, what's one of the greatest mindset shifts you've had in your life? Doesn't have to be on bullying, just one of those aha moments that makes you think about something differently.
Yeah, I think that a couple things, if I may. One is don't be so hard on yourself.
Yeah.
That was an aha moment to me. Somebody
Yeah.
said to me, Andy, why are you so hard on yourself? Give yourself some grace.
Yeah.
And I never did. I never did. I went from one job to
Yeah.
another, trying so hard and feeling so down.
Yeah.
In fact, I thought my career wasn't successful because of the way I'd been treated. And so give yourself some grace and don't be so hard on yourself, especially when someone else is being hard on you.
Yeah. That's nice. And we can all use that in every area of our lives, right?
Personal and professional.
Yeah,
Yeah.
personally, professionally, across the spectrum, right? And even with ourselves, our internal dialogue. Sometimes we're the worst bullies in the world to ourselves. Our internal dialogue is worse than anything anybody could ever say to us, or we could imagine anybody saying to us. So I
Yeah.
love this beautiful advice. Where can people learn more about you, Andy?
Yeah, so very simple. I'm at Andy Regal, regal.com. You can learn a lot more about me, pre-order the book. The main thing I'm in this work to do, and you're doing it too, is, and thank you for this opportunity, is so that we can create dialogue, awareness, and really change the way the workplace operates so that it
Yeah.
can be healthier, happier, and more productive for everyone.
Yeah, beautiful. And we'll make sure to put that in the show notes for our listeners. And I do suggest you follow up. It's an important topic we don't talk about enough. Well, Andy, thank you so much for sharing your insights about this. And I think these are all lessons that our legal profession in particular can take note of to show up and be practice with purpose, practice differently, show up better. So thank you for joining us with that.
Thank you, Cindy. It's been a pleasure.
And that's a wrap for this episode. So until next time, go forth and find ways that you can practice more on purpose. Find a better way to practice law so you can rekindle your passion and make a difference in the world, negotiating your best life on your terms at the same time. Until next time, take care.